Hello, everybody. Welcome to Relax with Animal Facts. I am Steph Wolf, and today we're going to be going over one of our furry, scaly, or possibly slimy friends. Well, not exactly possibly. We know in this case that it is rather an armored friend because it is the armadillo. A lot of people know what an armadillo is, so I just assume that the majority of you have heard of one. So, spoiler alert, they're armored. Okay. So just to let you guys know, today's podcast is going to be possibly a little bit shorter. I'm not entirely sure. It's just I am so swamped with work right now, so it's I'm just making sure that I make one of these because I really like doing it, and I know all of you guys are waiting for Monday morning. So this might be a little bit shorter of an episode, but I'm still gonna do my absolute best to be here with you guys and learn with you guys about our new friend today. So in case you're new to the podcast, what this show is all about is it's about me going into an animal. So I research an animal through the internet, through the power of the internet, and I get facts, and I sit down with you and I read them and extrapolate on them, and sometimes get a little bit skeptical about them. But so this is an educational sort of podcast, but it's also a relaxing podcast. So this is where you can relax and unwind, and you can listen attentively. You can just drift off. You can, tune in and out. It is absolutely entirely up to you. And before I get into the show, if you want to hear your animal on the podcast, you can go to relaxwithanimalfacts.com, and you can click on animal requests, and you can send me an animal that you would like. It could be a super specific animal. It can be anything. And I'm sure that everybody else on the podcast would love to hear about it. So don't be shy to write in. If you want to be anonymous, you can stay anonymous, absolutely. You can give a fake name if you'd like. I can shout out the fake name on the podcast. So if you want to have your animal featured on the show, if you want to learn a little bit more about it, you can go ahead and go on the website and click on the animal requests section, mobile or tablet, anything that you have. Today, I got my sources from Live Science and National Geographic, I believe. So the armadillo, this was an episode I was supposed to do a little bit before, but I wasn't able to do it because of a audio issue. So I'm going to go ahead and go dive deep into these guys here. So there are 20 different varieties of armadillo, and all but one live in Latin America. There's only one species of those that is outside of there, and that is the familiar 9-banded armadillo, and that is the only species of armadillo that has the United States in its range. So maybe if you think about armadillos and you're in the USA, you might be thinking of the 9-banded armadillo. So we'll get a little bit deeper into the species of each one in a second. So they are closely related to anteaters and sloths. So I love reading about how close things are in evolutionary lineage, because then we can sort of pinpoint and look at certain things, like maybe these qualities are, maybe there's some sort of physical characteristics or behaviors or something like that can sort of lead us into really getting it through our heads that these animals are related. So when I think about an armadillo, if you haven't seen one before, you can either Google it or you can listen to my description of it just here in a sec. But for the sloths, I think that this might be something more to do with the behavioral sort of things, because I don't imagine a sloth and an armadillo being in any way physically sort of the same, or not same or similar, or they have some similar characteristics. I don't really see that. Maybe we'll explore that later down. But with the anteaters, anteaters have almost the sort of similar face structures. So armadillos generally will have a pointy or shovel-shaped snout with those small eyes, and those are sort of characteristic to anteaters as well, except of course their mouths are going to be, or their snouts are going to be much longer, because they, you know what, I'm not going to go too deep into the anteater because that's an awesome thing to cover on the podcast, but yeah, so closely related to anteaters and sloths. And the armadillo varies pretty widely in size and color. So there's the 6-inch long salmon colored pink fairy armadillo. That is quite a resume. And there is a 5-foot long dark brown giant armadillo. So we can see here the great sense of contrast that we have between the two, from a 5-foot long to a 6-inch long armadillo. And others will have a black or red gray or almost yellowish coloring. So the salmon colored pink fairy armadillo, I'm wondering if there's possibly those physical characteristics having to do something with camouflage. I very much doubt it, because these guys, there's no way where they live they're going to be camouflaged like that. I'm going to get into where they live in just one quick second. Actually, we might as well get into it now. Well, they live in temperate and warm habitats, and that includes rainforests, semi-deserts, and grasslands. So I'm going to, that is why I chose to have these guys in the forest section as well, because it's not as too diverse of a habitat kind of a range for me to qualify them as diverse habitats on the show. So rainforests, semi-deserts, and grasslands. So if you think about a salmon-colored pink fairy armadillo, where are they going to be camouflaged? I would say the most in sort of semi-deserts, because against greenery, pink does not really blend in quite well. So it is possibly something as a result of what they eat in terms of their diet, because we learned on the flamingo episode that they get their coloration from the things they eat. So it's very possible. And not all armadillos are able to encase themselves in their shells. I read this fact and I was like, there's no way, because whenever I think of an armadillo, that is the first thing I think about. But in fact, only the 3-banded armadillo can go and do this and perform this little party trick, which is encasing themselves in their shells completely, which is odd, right? Because whenever I see them portrayed in media, they're almost always they almost always have this ability, or they're talked about having this ability. But we only have one species, the 3-banded armadillo, can completely encase themselves. So they curl their head and their back feet, and they will contour the shell into a hard ball. And this is a protective mechanism against predators, because predators, the second they feel like they're going to be spending more energy eating the food or getting the food than they will get nourishment from whatever they're going to eat, it is not worth it, and they'll just like turn around and leave. And with armadillos, that's exactly what they try to hope for, because in the wild, of course, we don't, they're not like our dogs and cats at home, where we leave food in the bowls for them at certain times. For them, sometimes predators won't eat for a long time, and a hunt will really, the energy they spend on the hunt can be absolutely crucial to their survival. So if they don't need to really get to that armadillo, they will leave it alone. So it'll encase itself in this hard, very hard armor, and it's the only mammal that has this sort of a protective armor going on. So just a 3-banded armadillo, don't forget, just that one species, will curl their head, back feet, and they will create a hard ball that is very hard for them to chew through. So they might just give up. And they have low metabolic rate and a lack of fat stores. So what this means, the first thing that it means is that I'm seeing a connection here with the sloth, because they have a low metabolic rate as well, which explains how slow they move. Go listen to the sloth episode if you haven't already. It's awesome. And a lack of fat stores. So the second thing that this means is that cold climates are pretty much their kryptonite. They don't want to be around cold climates if there's no reason. So that's why they prefer temperate rainforests, the semi-deserts, and the grasslands, because they have a lack of fat stores. So how are you going to survive cold climates? Fat stores provide not only, of course, energy over time, where they can, if they're having a hard time catching things, or eating or finding any kind of nourishment, they always have these fat stores that they can rely on for a while. But they rely on it for insulation as well. So we learned on the polar bear episode that this is exactly the case for them. So with a low metabolic rate, we see that connection to sloths, lack of fat stores, cold climates they really don't want to be in. So they will sleep a long time. They sleep around 16 hours per day, which is double that of a sloth, actually. The sloth only sleeps about 8 to 10, and they will forage early in the morning and the evening for beetles, ants, termites, and other insects. So they enjoy eating the insect species, really. So beetles, ants, termites. And it's important that everything is kept in check. Of course, if you have too many termites, if you have too many insects, it can cause a problem for other wildlife. So we see here nature striking a balance, of course, and the armadillo is a crucial part in this case. And they don't have very good eyesight. So what this means is that they will rely almost not entirely, but they rely mostly on a very good sense of smell. So I didn't know that. I didn't think of armadillos as smellers, really, but they rely on their smell to hunt. They have strong legs, of course, in comparison to their body size, large front claws that they will use to dig, and they have long tongues to get ants and termites from their tunnels. So they have a few things going on here that they're adapted to their environment. They will also eat small plants and some fruit, small vertebrates, but also the occasional carrion meal. So if opportunity strikes, they will indulge, of course, because this is the wild, and this is a wild armadillo that needs to survive. One of the most interesting things that I read about these guys is that they can get leprosy. So if you're not sure what leprosy is, it was mostly a problem for humans a few thousands of years ago. But it is a contagious disease that affects the skin, the mucous membranes, and nerves, and it causes discoloration and lumps on the skin, and in severe cases can result in deformities and disfigurement. So it's a bad disease, but a lot of animals can't get leprosy because it requires a certain genetic predisposition. It is something that requires certain genes for animals to get it, and armadillos have it just like humans, which is really odd, and I'm not sure why, but that is the way it is. And they are not very social creatures, so they will get together to mate or to keep warm, but other than that, they really don't like to be together. In certain cases during the cold times, because we've established that they do not like cold climates, they will, if they have to, form a group and kind of hunker down in a burrow together in order to save and share each other's body heat. So we've seen that in penguins before, and on the future penguin episode, I will allude back to this episode with the armadillo. So they share body heat. They have a gestation period of around 2 to 5 months. So 2 to 5 months is fairly average. It's nothing too out of the ordinary. I'm not going to expand into that too much. And the female will give birth to 1 to 12 young in a single birthing burrow. So 1 to 12 young, that's a fairly large amount. And birthing burrows are the holes that they dig with those sort of claws that they have. And they're able to go in there and use it as a shelter for their young, and in this case 1 to 12 young. So they may look small, but they can dig burrows up to 15 feet wide. That's according to the Internet Center for Wildlife Damage. So they're not very big, and having burrows that are 15 feet wide is very significant proportionality-wise. I wonder how long it takes for them to dig those birthing burrows. Anyways, you can take a guess right now what you think baby armadillos are called, and I almost guarantee you that it is not something that you would expect. They are called pups, just like dogs. Pups. That is really, really odd to me. Maybe there's something there that I don't understand, that there's a certain way of classifying things that requires they be called pups, but counterintuitive, but that's the way it is. And twin births are very common in armadillos. So 9 banded armadillos will have 4 identical pups of the same gender in every litter, and the 7 banded armadillo has 8 to 15 identical pups in one time. So we see twin births being extremely, extremely common. And in the case of the 9 banded and 7 banded armadillo, we have 4 identical pups. And in the 7, 8 identical. So that's a lot in one time. So they are weaned for around 2 to 4 months and it will take around 9 to 12 months for them to mature and have an offspring of their own. So a fairly average in the animal kingdom time for them to mature and to be able to have offspring of their very own. And they can live up to 30 years. 30 years is a long time for these little guys. The median life expectancy, though, for the three-banded armadillo specifically, so the three-banded, I believe that was the one that is the only one that really encases themselves in their shell. It's around 16 years. So if you're not familiar with this method of mean, median, and well, I forgot what the last one was. Mean, median, and mode. That's what it was. It's something we learned back in, I think, grade school, but it's something that a lot of people just kind of forget about. So the median life expectancy, what that means is that they took a population and they kind of went from descending to ascending order, and however many in the population they took it, went straight to the very middle, and that's what they got was 16 years. It's not the average, which would be the mean, where if they took all members of the population, their life expectancy, and then divided it by however many were in that population, it's median instead, so you take the very middle number. And some people eat armadillos and claim it tastes like pork. I'm not sure. I assume that means in Latin America, some cultures might even rely on armadillos, or it could just be something like a treat, but it's not something that I'm extremely interested in exploring. I like to eat a lot of things, but armadillo isn't exactly at the top of my list. And just some quick cool facts here. The 9-banded armadillo is the official state animal of Texas. So if you didn't know, that might be different as of now, but if it's not, I still believe it is the 9-banded armadillo, Texas. It's interesting. I wonder what the story behind that is. And by the way, if you ever hear something that you're super interested in, you can go ahead and search and see for yourself and light that passion for animals, right, that I have, that I'm sure a lot of you have. The giant armadillo can have up to 100 teeth. So that's the armadillo that was huge. That was 5 feet long that we covered earlier. And that's according to the San Diego Zoo. 100 teeth, that is close to triple or more than triple than a human being. And I'm not sure why they need so many teeth. I assume that they're still plant eaters. Well, not just plant eaters, but most likely omnivores with insects and whatnot. And having more teeth can be an advantage to grinding down leafy material, of course, depending on the shape of the tooth as well. So having more flat teeth will help with that. The screaming hairy armadillo, I love that. That's my favorite armadillo. The screaming hairy armadillo gets its name from the sound that it makes when it's threatened. So it will scream, of course, but just because they scream doesn't mean they're cowards, because researchers have seen that they are known to throw their bodies on top of snakes in order to kill them by cutting them using the sharp edges of their shells. So their armor around the edges can, of course, be sharp, and it's important for their survival that it is sharp, just in case. So they will kill snakes by throwing themselves on top of them and just trying to cut them with their shells. So although they are screaming hairy armadillos, I guess the scream can also be a war cry at the same time. And they are not considered endangered, but some of the species are considered vulnerable. So it depends. We've seen this before on the show where we have some varieties of the species being vulnerable or endangered or even at least concerned. So it really depends. It really depends on which species you're talking about. But for the most part, they're not considered endangered. And we're going to get into the final fact of the show, which is, what does armadillo mean? Where does it come from? The armadillo is a Spanish word that means little armored one. So, of course, amazing, very apt name for this guy. Little armored one is exactly what they are. I guess not for the giant armadillo, though, because they're not exactly so little. But I assume that this was named after they saw the smaller ones. But in the case of armadillo being a Spanish word, I assume that it is actually pronounced armadillo. It's possible it being armadillo, because we see the double L makes a Y sound in Spanish, like tortilla. It's not tortilla, but we say armadillo here in Western culture, I guess. So anyways, if you'd like to hear your animal on the show, write into relaxwithanimalfacts.com, click on submit an animal. You don't have to sign up for an account. You could if you want, but you can just send that anonymously or not, and you can hear your animal on the podcast. So thank you all so very much for tuning in. I apologize for the kind of shorter episode, but it's an incredibly busy time for me right now. But I always make time for all of you guys out there, so we can relax with some animal facts together. So thank you very much for listening, and I will see you on the next podcast episode with the next animal. Take care.